A moment of silence at the New York Stock Exchange this morning, just across from where the World Trade Center towers used to stand on the eve of the solemn 20-year anniversary of September 11th. We are live from Ground Zero tonight with a special edition of ABC News Live Prime. How did our country get here? And how are the victims and their loved ones left behind coping 20 years later? And tonight, are we safer than we were 20 years ago? What threats still exist? And what's the status of al-Qaeda and terrorist groups out there trying to harm Americans at home and abroad? Tonight, we honor the brave heroes of Flight 93, the selfless individuals who took down their plane, preventing terrorists from taking any additional lives that day. Now their loved ones honor their memory in the place they made the ultimate sacrifice.
We come here to love each other because our families went down together.
Our Juju Chang is in Shanksville, Pennsylvania tonight. And the children of 9/11, the brothers and sisters tonight following in their father's footsteps, becoming firefighters after their dad died trying to save others on that fateful day. The push tonight to preserve his memory and the memory of all of those who lost their lives. Our emotional conversation.
You know it's really dead when the name's mentioned for the last time. And I thought that was powerful, you know, and if that's the case, then my father and these men that were killed that day and sacrificed their life, they're going to live forever, you know, through their legacy and their actions.
There is other news on this Friday night, the fight over vaccine mandates. Can the government force companies to get in line? Tonight, the Biden administration defending the decision to up the ante for vaccine-hesitant Americans. And the fight for the right to repair. It's a push gaining steam tonight in industries ranging from electronics to farming to medical devices. The basic premise, it should not be difficult to fix things once they're broken. And also tonight, a moment for the history books. Two teenage women barely known to anyone, both unranked, now on the biggest stage of their lives, vying for the U.S. Open Championship. Tonight, we are live from Ground Zero in New York City. You are looking at the reflecting pools, the somber scene of the memorial for the fallen. The Americans who woke up 20 years ago thinking it was just going to be another ordinary day, and then everything changed. Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. We are on the eve of that solemn milestone, 20 years after hate arrived at our shores, planes that pierced the calm of that cool, sunny September morning that forever changed this country. For so many, there's a before and an after September 11th, 2001. If you were alive that day, you likely remember where you were. All week long, we've relived the trauma that we shared that day, the horror, the mental wounds. And all day here, we've seen people stopping by to pay their respects to the 2,977 lives lost on September 11th and the many more since then. So many still carrying deeply personal burdens 20 years later, like these four children who followed in their father's footsteps, becoming firefighters to honor his sacrifice. Tonight, we find some comfort and inspiration from hearing those stories of the heroism displayed 20 years ago. A large portion of our show tonight will be about that resilience and the human spirit. But first tonight, on the eve of this solemn milestone, is our country safer? And what terror groups may be trying to still hurt us? Our Martha Raddatz leads us off.
It began on a clear, bright day with no warning. The deadliest terror attack on U.S. soil in the history of this nation.
We just got a report in that there's been some sort of explosion at the World Trade Center in New York City.
Nearly 3,000 people died on 9/11, more than 6,000 injured. That day, sending a generation and then another to what would be America's longest war. It would take 10 years before the U.S. killed the mastermind of the attack, Osama bin Laden. Ayman al-Zawahiri, an Egyptian doctor often seen by bin Laden's side, succeeded him. But he has not been heard from in years, with many analysts believing he is in ill health or even dead.
I think it's accurate to say that al-Qaeda has a diminished capability. When ISIS came on the scene, they decided to kind of move into a quiet and patient strategy. They decided that they could wait us out.
But with the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan and the government now run by the Taliban, the same group that once provided safe haven for bin Laden and al-Qaeda, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin now worries that al-Qaeda will regenerate and says he has put put the Taliban on notice. They should not allow that to happen. But al-Qaeda is not the only concern in Afghanistan. ISIS-K behind the suicide bombing at the Kabul airport that left 13 U.S. service members and 170 Afghans dead is a clear and growing threat.
The threat today is different than what we faced 20 years ago. It has evolved and morphed, and in some ways we are in a better place, but in other ways it's more complex. They have a really difficult time moving terrorists from overseas into the United States and carrying out a complex coordinated attack. So they change their tactics. They use plotters and bomb experts to train people online so that they can carry out attacks here.
Martha Raddatz joins us now from outside of the Pentagon. Martha, we heard there that the al-Qaeda and other terror groups have changed their tactics at this point. But how concerned are military officials about the threats that could still emerge from overseas after the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan?
There is great concern still, Lindsay. In fact, back in June, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the Secretary of Defense both warned that al-Qaeda could regenerate. And that was before the Taliban took over and before ISIS carried out that suicide bombing in Kabul. So the concern remains. There is this over this horizon option. They can target terror cells, but there is some risk to that because you aren't there with boots on the ground.
And speaking of the boots on the ground, you've reported on how the Biden administration says it will still be able to monitor and respond to threats even without having that physical presence there. But what are the limitations of that?
Well, there really are limitations because you're looking from afar. It's just you're not face to face. You don't have the military there. You don't have the CIA operatives in the force they were before because they, too, need that kind of protection from the military. Even the CIA director says it is a greater risk not having U.S. forces there. Lindsay?
Martha Raddatz, our thanks to you. Let's bring in our Chief Justice correspondent, Pierre Thomas, who's been monitoring the security picture ahead of this 9/11 anniversary. Pierre, we know the threat from overseas remains, but federal authorities for some time really have been pointing to the threat from domestic extremists.
Lindsay, today the Homeland Security Secretary said the greatest terror threat to America is domestic, often motivated by hate. But while the domestic terror threat may be expanding, in recent weeks the FBI has been warning that radicals inspired by ISIS and al-Qaeda have been active on social media urging attacks. So even though no credible threat has been identified for the 9/11 anniversary, these are tense times. In any given moment, the FBI is investigating hundreds, if not thousands, of terrorism suspects, both domestic and internationally inspired. In the last 4 years, Lindsay, the FBI has arrested nearly 1,000 terrorism suspects. So this threat is real and ongoing.
Tense times indeed. Pierre Thomas, our thanks to you. That threat picture is rather complex, so much so earlier this afternoon I had a chance to speak with a top official from the NYPD on what they're monitoring. I'm joined now by the NYPD's Chief of Counterterrorism, Martin Matarazzo, and I have to say it's remarkable that a police department has its very own counterterrorism operation. Let me start by saying, first of all, thank you for joining us, and also we will not forget the sacrifice and the heroism made by NYPD officers on September 11, 2001. That being said, NYPD has told ABC News that there are no credible threats for tomorrow's ceremony, but what still concerns you as far as a potential threat?
New York is always going to be a #1 target, so we have to make sure that we are investigating any possible lead that anything could be going on here to the fullest extent.
What kind of resources go into protecting New York City and keeping us all safe?
Well, in any event that comes up, months of planning. We don't just start to do it the day or 2 days before. We're planning for months. So this ceremony coming up, we've been planning now for months, and we make sure that we have a multi-layered, robust plan in place for every screening process, every entrance, from the top above buildings down to the ground.
There have been so many changes to security in the past 20 years, specifically with the NYPD to securing the city. What would you say has been the biggest change in that time?
Well, like 20 years ago, right, there was really no need for a counterterrorism bureau, but 9/11 changed that for all of us, and that's why we've become the largest and the most trained and highly equipped counterterrorism bureau in the country.
When the Taliban took over in Afghanistan just a few weeks ago, did that cause your own department to go on higher alert?
Yes, we're at a heightened alert at this moment, like you said, due to the circumstances overseas, and as well as this event coming up that is so historic for the country.
You know, many people often see al-Qaeda or terrorism overseas as the real threat. And in recent years, certainly there's been more attention paid to homegrown terrorists and white nationalists and a concern of people who are right here in our backyard. So how does that change your surveillance and your operation?
Yeah, I mean, we look at both. We look at abroad, we look at here in our own country, we look at, you know, who are they looking to target? Are they inspired by some sort of propaganda? And that's what we do see. So we do monitor all that social media. We're on the internet all the time. So once we see that propaganda come out, our alert goes up to make sure that we're at our eyes on anybody that could potentially do something to target a location within New York City.
And you told me on a personal note that you started with the force before September 11th. We're talking 20 plus years ago. As a member of the department yourself, how do you feel now as we are at this 20-year mark?
I mean, as we stand here with the tower behind us, I mean, I have chills. You know, the bagpipes are in the background, and you could just envision yourself walking down to that site on that night, that afternoon, whenever you actually did arrive there. And you've got everything from chills to sadness, you know, deepest, darkest day that was for us. And it's just something that we'll never forget.
Chief, we thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
For nearly 20 years, we have followed the people forever linked by 9/11, the survivors, heroes, and the families who lost their loved ones. David Muir retraced that day, all of the lives that intersected, and their hope for this country 20 years later.
The morning of 9/11, it was warm, it was clear skies, it was a beautiful fall.
It was a clear, beautiful morning.
Yeah, it was. I would walk past the fire department, and so I could say hi to the firemen that I would see all the time.
You were making breakfast for the girls in the kitchen.
I was. We had gotten up early. It was Anna Claire's first day of preschool.
I'm Diane, Sawyer, and it's Tuesday, September 11th, 2001.
I turned on the television to watch the news.
This was your second day on the job?
My second day on the job, yes. Reporting to the Pentagon for work. Started out like a regular day.
They are the stories of 9/11, forever linked by what happened that day.
This is at the World Trade Center, and there has been some sort of explosion. We don't fully know the details. There is one report that a plane has hit the World Trade Center.
17 minutes later, the South Tower.
The plane hit one floor above you.
Yeah. And I realized if I had stayed up there, I would have been dead. What caught my attention was the fact that people that I knew were 100 plus stories up were hanging outside of the window. And I watched them. They were making a sign of the cross, holding hands, and jumping. To me, those people were heroes.
Of the last 25 people out of the South Tower, Florence was number 18. We have followed her for nearly 20 years, and we will never forget seeing those reflecting pools for the first time.
Wow.
The names of the fallen etched in bronze, and Florence's friend, Jill Moore Campbell.
I always remember Jill's smile. I try never to think about the way she died. As a company, we were very very close. We all knew Jill.
And now, 20 years later,
a phone call from Jill's son.
Oh, I was so happy to talk to him.
Our thanks to David for that. On the morning of 9/11, New York and Washington certainly were not the only cities that were hit with tragedy. United Flight 93, as you remember, was also hijacked on that day. Its target believed to be either the White House or the U.S. Capitol. But because of the brave men and women on board that flight who decided to fight back, the plane crashed in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. C.C. Ross Niles was on board that plane, a former police officer turned flight attendant who was working Flight 93 and who helped take down the terrorists. Earlier, I caught up with Juju Chang after she had just spoken with her family.
When you think of what transpired on that plane, what do you think of? What do you think your daughter was up to?
We listened to the black box, and the first thing comes to my mind is that she went to this couple that were missionaries, and they prayed. That is the first thing, very, very important. Then they said she was one of the people that was boiling the water to pour on the hijackers, and then when they said, let's roll, she was ready to go. You know, she did her part, but she did the first and most important thing is she got over there with those people and they prayed and prayed for her. And that was such a blessing to my heart.
We can imagine. And Juju joins us now from Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Juju, such a powerful story from Cece's mother about what her daughter did on that flight. It just has to be unmistakably a difficult time for her family once again right now. How did they describe Cece as far as what kind of person she was?
Well, we spent a lot of time talking about Cece today, and she was a high school cheerleader and the life of the party in many ways, but she was also a bodybuilder and became a law enforcement officer for 6 years, following in the footsteps of her big brother, Tony. Now, Tony told me that she was the kind of girl who would always stick up for the little guy and was always impressed by doing the right thing, but mostly she was also a devoted mother. She called her husband in the midst of that flight and calmly told him that Flight 93 had been hijacked. Please tell the kids I love them, she said, and said, I hope to see you again. And at that point, she said goodbye. And with that, her family is convinced that she went into battle mode, that she was in the thick of the efforts to take down the hijackers, because that was exactly the kind of person she was, standing up to evil.
Just get chills hearing those accounts of what happened on board that flight. Cece's mom, Shirley, also told you that she's come to Shanksville for the past 20 years. What's that been like for them? And what are they feeling right now as they remember Cece on this anniversary?
Well, every year the family members, you can see this beautiful grassy knoll behind me, and just over it is the crash site of Flight 93. It is hallowed ground. But year after year, the family members come here, and part of the remembrance is to walk out onto that field. Only family members are allowed to do so. And she says she comes here literally for 20 years in a row to make sure that her daughter's memory is honored and celebrated, but also represented in the larger group of heroic stories that is Flight 93 here in Shanksville. But I will also tell you that she comes back because she's told me that over the years she's bonded with the 39 other families, that they've celebrated births and deaths and weddings together. She said, we've come to love each other because our families went down together, and together they are making the sacrifice and the bravery and frankly the patriotism that happened on board Flight 93, something that will remain in the history books. She told me, though, tomorrow she doesn't want to feel sad. On this 20th anniversary, she wants to celebrate Cece and all those who were lost on 9/11. Lindsay?
So many share that sentiment. Juju, thank you. We turn now to the other major news today, with strong reaction to President Biden's new pandemic battle plan, calling for large businesses to mandate vaccines for their employees. The CDC today supporting him with new studies showing that vaccines dramatically reduce the risk of hospitalization and death, even from the Delta variant, and that the unvaccinated are some 4.5 times more likely to get COVID, 10 times more likely to be hospitalized, and 11 times more likely to die. ABC's chief national correspondent Matt Guttmann has the latest.
Tonight, as the country staggers past that grim milestone of 1 in 500 Americans killed by COVID, millions of American workers face a new reality: the president's sweeping move to mandate vaccinations.
The right thing to do is to mandate it, unfortunately, because a lot of people are passing away.
I understand the intention, but at the end of the day, I still feel like people should have the right to choose.
And already, Republican governors in at least 19 states blasting the new rule for businesses.
You should not lose your job just because Joe Biden is having this hissy fit.
The governor of South Carolina saying he will fight them to the gates of hell. And those 19 states with some of the lowest vaccination rates have seen COVID cases surge this summer. Our Rachel Scott today pressing the president on Republicans' vow to fight those mandates.
Mr. President, what is your message to Republicans who are calling your vaccine requirements an overreach, who are threatening to challenge it in court?
Have at it. Look, I am so disappointed that particularly some Republican governors have been so cavalier with the health of these kids.
The president bracing for the political battle ahead. With 75% of Americans already partially vaccinated, the White House aiming to reach the last quarter of American adults who remain unvaccinated. And tonight, there is fresh evidence the vaccines remain highly effective in preventing severe symptoms, even against the Delta variant. The CDC reporting today that more than 90% of patients in hospitals are unvaccinated.
Those who were unvaccinated were about 4.5 times more likely to get COVID-19, over 10 times more likely to be hospitalized, and 11 times more likely to die.
But data is showing the vaccine is slightly less effective for older people, about 80% effective at keeping them out of the hospital versus about 90% for younger people. Just this week, President Biden saying that the decision over the booster shot, that third shot, is in the hands of the FDA and the CDC, and the administration will distribute them as soon as they're authorized. This map showing the relentless spread of the virus just over the past 6 weeks. Kentucky today calling in more than 300 National Guard to its hospitals.
We're already at max capacity. We're already stretched so thin. What do we do when we have our winter surge that we can count on every year?
Some concern now about discriminatory treatment based on who has the vaccine and who does not. Matt Guttmann joins us now. Matt, going back to that new CDC report, it also found some significant differences with the 3 vaccines and their ability to keep people out of the hospital. What did it show?
Scientists are telling us that there could be some concerning data in that study. They show that the Moderna vaccine, 95% effective at reducing the risk of hospitalizations. Pfizer, 80%, and Johnson & Johnson, just 60% effective. That means that the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, and this is just initially, is 50% less effective than the Moderna vaccine. And going forward, this could have significant implications and raises a number of concerns over the issue of boosters, the dosage of boosters, and timing of those boosters going forward. Lindsay.
All right, we'll be staying tuned for more information on that. Matt Guttmann, our thanks to you. And to help us unpack the legal issues surrounding the vaccine mandates, we bring in Valerie Guttmann, co-director of the Health Law and Policy Institute at the University of Houston Law School. Valerie, thank you so much for your time and joining us tonight. You've said that President Biden's vaccine mandate for employers is, in fact, constitutional. Explain for us why.
Well, so generally, President Biden or any president has direct congressional authorization under the Occupational Health and Safety Act, or OSHA. And so he has this authority to regulate workplace health and safety. So he can therefore mandate, or OSHA can mandate, vaccines based on the agency's findings that vaccinations are necessary to protect employees from the grave danger that's presented by COVID-19.
And some states are now threatening to bring lawsuits challenging this mandate. How do you see those playing out in court?
I do see there will be some lawsuits from governors. They're going to challenge these mandates. I do think those challenges will ultimately fail. We may, in the meantime, see some district courts, some lower courts, and some jurisdictions issue temporary restraining orders or preliminary injunctions against some of these rules, just as they have in relation to so many other COVID-related rules over the last 18 months. But ultimately, I think that these rules are needed to protect communities, and they are on legally solid ground. They're appropriately limited to remain within the presidential executive authority and congressional authorization. And we just need to make sure that they are carefully crafted to withstand any legal challenges.
And we understand that you were law school classmates with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. You heard his words where he was basically saying you shouldn't lose your job because the president is having a hissy fit. What's your reaction to that?
We were in the same constitutional law class, and there we learned that the Supreme Court has recognized in a case specifically about vaccine mandates that individuals can be subjected to certain requirements in the interest of the common good.
And finally, I assume that the government can't force vaccinations into our arms. So tell us where the line would be between constitutional and unconstitutional vaccine mandates.
I think that's one of the really important facts about President Biden's mandates. They are carefully crafted to stay within the limits of presidential power. There is no, they would never hold anybody down or stick a needle into them. There is still very much choice to refuse the vaccine. Under the OSHA rules, there would also be a choice to be tested on a weekly basis. And again, most employers have the authority to make decisions about what their employees can and can't do. And so this is very much within an employer's right to mandate vaccines with these types of consequences.
Valerie Guttmann Cook, we thank you so much for your time. I appreciate your insight.
Happy to be here.
When we come back, the alleged mass shooting plot by 2 middle school students, how police say the plot was ultimately thwarted. Legacy and loss. The father of 6, a New York firefighter who lost his life on 9/11. 20 years later, 4 of his children have honored his legacy by becoming firefighters themselves. The emotional story that you will not want to miss. But switching gears for a moment, why is it that when so many of our gadgets break down, we have to buy entirely new ones? Coming up, our closer look at the right to repair movement.
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any place else. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir, America's #1 most watched newscast, now streaming on ABC News Live.
Robin Roberts, George Stephanopoulos, Michael Strahan. Wake up with America's #1 most watched morning show. ABC's
Good Morning America.
The world may feel out of your control, but your happiness doesn't have to be. Learn the secrets to happiness. Listen to the 10% Happier podcast, free on Apple Podcasts.
Right now, with so much at stake, thank you for making ABC's This Week with George the #1 Sunday morning news show versus the competition.
Welcome to This Week.
Now streaming on ABC News Live 2020. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues. The Hunt. True crime 2020. Now streaming on ABC News Live. This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
All right, we're gonna move back. Let's move back.
We're surrounded by people
Squeezing into this bomb shelter.
We're on an urgent delivery run.
Not afraid to go there.
So my question, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Breaking news, live events.
This is the moment.
Streaming straight to you, anytime, anywhere.
You just met one friend right here.
You're watching ABC News Live. Thanks for streaming with us.
It was an extraordinary story.
A computer salesman was supposed to report to prison to begin a 17-year sentence.
They let him turn himself into jail with no escort.
No one thought he would run.
How do you evade capture for 25 years? How do you do that?
Now, join the search, following the U.S. Marshals as they uncover new leads in a global manhunt. Can you help catch this fugitive?
Have you seen this man?
Have you seen this man?
Have you seen this man? Listen and join the all-new hunt wherever you get your podcasts.
Take a look at this dramatic video from Ewing, New Jersey. Officers in New Jersey rescuing motorists during that historic flooding that happened last week. In this video, a female who became trapped in fast-moving floodwaters was pulled to safety by officers and firefighters nearby. First responders once again doing heroes' work. Now to a battle gaining momentum over something called the right to repair. The push for consumers to be able to repair their own products, from iPhones to John Deere tractors, rather than having to rely on the manufacturer. And Washington is now taking notice. Here's ABC's Elizabeth Schulze.
Just fill this form out.
In this small repair shop in Washington, D.C., 25-year-old Mohammed makes his living fixing phones.
What time do you guys open on Sunday?
But the job, he says, is getting harder thanks to big tech companies like Apple.
The cost is expensive, it's hard to get parts, and it's even impossible to repair certain things.
He says it's a major challenge to find, buy, and install replacement parts without going directly through Apple and paying a steep price. A criticism echoed by many other independent repair shop owners.
This is a $2,000 MacBook Pro laptop. This is the motherboard that goes into the machine. It's like the brain.
Louis Rossman fixes laptops and has amassed 1.6 million followers on YouTube as an activist for the right to repair.
This is not something that's unique to Apple, nor is it something that's unique to the laptop repair industry.
In industries ranging from electronics to farming to medical devices, the right to repair is gaining traction. The basic premise, it shouldn't be so hard to fix things when they're broken.
In simple terms, how would you describe the right to repair?
It's the idea that you bought it, you own it, it's yours to do whatever you want with, and you shouldn't have to ask permission from the prior owner, like the manufacturer, to be able to fix it.
It's a familiar concept when it comes to fixing old cars, furniture, or shoes. But as more products get embedded with computer chips and software, getting a repair isn't as easy as taking it to the local corner shop.
Anything that has a chip in it right now is probably impossible to repair without using the manufacturer.
Critics say some companies are setting up unnecessary roadblocks, and regulators are taking note. In a May report to Congress, the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, warned manufacturers are making repairs harder, like using adhesives that make parts difficult to replace, limiting the availability of spare parts, or making software unavailable. The result can mean higher costs for consumers, less competition, and more environmental waste.
Many companies now force us to only have a few set of choices when we want to get something fixed. And their hope sometimes is that we won't fix it at all and we'll just buy a new device or piece of equipment altogether.
In July, President Biden signed a wide-ranging executive order urging the FTC to promote the right to repair. The agency unanimously voted later that month to step up its enforcement against companies that impose illegal repair restrictions. And the FTC is also taking a broader stance against restrictive repair policies.
There's actually an old law on the books from 40 years ago that prevents manufacturers from tying certain repair services for products covered by warranties.
The right to repair hits close to home for Walter Schweitzer, who owns a small family farm in Montana.
I need my equipment to work when it's time to work.
2 years ago, Schweitzer's tractor shut down in the middle of the critical 2-week harvest season. A local John Deere dealer said it could take a month to get it fixed. And there was no way for Schweitzer to do the repair himself.
So I asked him, can I borrow the troubleshooting software so I can figure out the problem? No. Okay, well, can I rent it? No. All right, well, I'll buy this dang stuff so I can figure out my own problem. No, we don't sell it. I was being held hostage by the equipment manufacturer, not allowing me to repair my own equipment.
And as a result, could have affected your whole harvest, your whole crop, really?
Absolutely.
Schweitzer turned to his 40-year-old tractor to get the harvest done. And when it was time to buy new equipment,
I just bought a tractor a few months ago, and I bought an older tractor just so I could avoid the technology that requires a computer to fix.
In a statement to ABC News, John Deere said it's committed to ensuring its customers have access to the tools, software, parts, and manuals to operate and repair their equipment safely. Schweitzer doesn't blame his dealer, saying the overall lack of competition in the farm equipment market is leading to higher prices and bottlenecks in repairs.
There's 3 major equipment manufacturers that manufacture 90% of the equipment American farmers use.
Farm equipment manufacturers and dealers say they're committed to making maintenance, diagnostic, and repair information more accessible, adding some right-to-repair efforts are overly broad and can risk safety, durability, and environmental sustainability of products. Tech lobbyists and trade groups staunchly oppose right-to-repair laws under consideration in at least 27 states.
More than half of states are now considering legislation on the right to repair. Is this something that really should be stopped? This clearly has bipartisan support.
The bills would undermine billions of dollars of intellectual property interests by mandating that manufacturers reveal those trade secrets to anyone who hangs up a shingle and says that they do repairs.
Apple says it's expanding options for repairs around the world, pointing to its independent repair program, which aims to help qualifying companies get access to its parts. And the company says customers should have convenient access to safe and reliable repair services.
Consumers, as well as businesses and hospitals and public schools and everybody else, all need reasonable assurance that those they trust to repair their products will do so safely, securely, and correctly.
Why does the right to repair matter to really every American, not just someone trying to buy a new phone or getting their phone fixed or someone with a tractor that's broken?
I think the pandemic taught us that when we face disruptions, we need to have an economy that lets us spring back into action. But when companies block us from fixing our own equipment or our own medical devices or our own home appliances, that just makes it tougher for us to bounce back.
Elizabeth Schulze, ABC News, Washington.
Our thanks to Elizabeth for that. Still ahead here on Crime, the strong words from one Supreme Court justice about the new Texas abortion law. Hope and determination, how one mother and her biological son found each other. And what has happened to Ground Zero 20 years later? We take a look by the numbers. But first, our tweet of the day. The photographer searching for the people in this photo. So far, he's found 7 of them.
All right, here we go. You ready? Let's do it.
Yes, it's the show America wants and America needs right now.
This is What Would You Do? Let's go. How are you? Yeah.
So what will you be watching Saturdays on ABC News Live?
What would you do?
Hey, I guess I just found out.
The What Would You Do Marathon, 12 to 6 Eastern, every Saturday on ABC News Live.
My favorite show.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
All right, we're gonna move back. Let's move back.
We're surrounded by people
Squeezing into this bomb shelter.
We're on an urgent delivery run.
Not afraid to go there.
So my question, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Breaking news, live events.
This is the moment.
Streaming straight to you, anytime, anywhere.
You just met one friend right here.
You're watching ABC News Live. Thanks for streaming with us.
Admit it. These days, what you need to know
Seems to change just about every day.
what is it that you really want to know, need to know,
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
It's all about you.
Reunites, Assault on the Capitol, the ABC News original, exclusively on Hulu, now streaming. With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any place else. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir, America's #1 most watched newscast, now streaming on ABC News Live.
The world may feel out of your control, but your happiness doesn't have to be. Learn the secrets to happiness. Listen to the 10% Happier podcast, free on Apple Podcasts.
Robin Roberts, George Stephanopoulos, Michael Strahan. Wake up with America's #1 most watched morning show. ABC's
Good Morning America.
Right now, with so much at stake, thank you for making ABC's This Week with George the #1 Sunday morning news show versus the competition.
Welcome to This Week.
Welcome back, everyone, to a special edition of Prime. In the weeks after the September 11th attacks, this place, Ground Zero, was a smoldering heap of tangled metal, debris, and dust. But even after 2 decades of construction and rebuilding, many of the plans for this hallowed site remain unfinished. We take a look by the numbers. 1,776 feet, a symbolic number for our nation. That's the height of One World Trade Center. It opened in 2014 as the tallest building in the Western Hemisphere. The National September 11th Memorial Museum also opened that year. 2011, that's when the Memorial Plaza and its twin reflecting pools opened. 3 additional glass towers have been built here since 9/11, but 2 planned skyscrapers are still incomplete after 20 years. One of these, located at 2 World Trade Center, might someday reach 80 stories. It was supposed to be the 2nd tallest skyscraper at the site, but right now it's just a low stump of a building. 2023, that's when an unfinished performing arts center is scheduled to open after years of delays. Construction of a Greek Orthodox church has also been delayed. And a final note, many thought that Lower Manhattan would be a ghost town after 9/11, that people wouldn't want to live or work here again. But actually, the residential population here has tripled since September 2001. That's just one testament to the resilience of this city. And we still have lots to get to here on Prime tonight, honoring their father, the brothers and sister who followed in their father's footsteps after he died on 9/11, and they all became firefighters. The zebra scandal in the nation's capital, yes, you heard that right. And the first all-teen showdown in decades at the U.S. Open. But first, a look at our top trending stories on abcnews.com.
World News Now.
And America This Morning.
The best new video.
The breaking news overnight.
Emergency crews called to the town of Surfside.
U.S. airstrikes hitting targets in Iraq and Syria.
The stories people are talking about.
You don't want to shave your legs? Don't. I was going to say.
Oh my. Got it.
And what to expect in the day ahead.
ABC World News Now and America This Morning.
Starting at 2 a.m. Eastern.
Up all night to keep you up to date.
Being babies of 9/11, it's definitely not the traditional grieving process. It's almost like you work backwards.
Now, on the eve of the 20th anniversary, Diane Sawyer reunites with the children of 9/11.
I would just want one day. So I think that's all I would ever want.
The mothers, the families.
There's still something broken. We carry it with us.
She's like the strongest person I've ever met.
I love you, buddy.
The 2020 event special, tonight on ABC.
It was an extraordinary story.
A computer salesman was supposed to report to prison to begin a 17-year sentence.
They let him turn himself into jail with no escort.
No one thought he would run.
How do you evade capture for 25 years? How do you do that?
Now, join the search, following the U.S. Marshals as they uncover new leads in a global manhunt. Can you help catch this fugitive?
Have you seen this man?
Have you seen this man?
Have you seen this man? Listen and join the all-new hunt wherever you get your podcasts.
The world may feel out of your control, but your happiness doesn't have to be. Learn the secrets to happiness. Listen to the 10% Happier podcast, free on Apple Podcasts.
Right now, with so much at stake, thank thank you for making ABC's This Week with George the #1 Sunday morning news show versus the competition.
Welcome to This Week.
This is GMA3, what you need to know. GMA3.
A third hour of Good Morning America in the afternoon.
It's all about you. Lunchtime on ABC.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
All right, we're going to move back. Let's move back. We're surrounded by people.
Squeezing into this bomb shelter.
We're on an urgent delivery run.
Not afraid to go there.
So my question, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Breaking news, live events.
This is the moment.
Streaming straight to you, anytime, anywhere.
You just met one friend right here.
You're watching ABC News Live. Thanks for streaming with us.
Now streaming on ABC News Live 2020. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues. The Hunt. True crime 2020. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
The most powerful stories of our time, anytime. Nightline.
As the country staggers past that grim milestone of 1 in 500 Americans killed by COVID, millions of American workers face a new reality: the president's sweeping move to mandate vaccinations.
The right thing to do is to mandate it.
At the end of the day, I still feel like people should have the right to choose.
And already, Republican governors in at least 19 states blasting the new rule for businesses.
You should not lose your job just because Joe Biden is having this hissy fit.
And those 19 states with some of the lowest vaccination rates have seen COVID cases surge this summer.
Police near Fort Myers, Florida say they've foiled a mass shooting plot at this middle school.
We are 1 second away from a Columbine here.
13 and 14-year-old boys arrested after police say another student told a teacher one of the teens had a gun. Authorities say no gun was found, but they did find a map with locations of all the school security cameras. And they say search warrants at the boys' homes turned up a gun and several knives. Investigators say the kids had been studying the Columbine massacre.
Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer criticizing the court for refusing to block the new Texas law banning most abortions in the state. The court ruling 5-4, allowing the law to stand. In an interview with NPR, Justice Breyer suggesting the decision was a grave mistake.
I thought the last decision you mentioned was very, very, very wrong. I'll add one more very. And I wrote a dissent. And that's the way it works.
The Justice Department now suing Texas, calling the law unconstitutional.
The Women's U.S. Open Final will feature 2 teenagers who've become the darlings of tennis. 19-year-old Leylah Fernandez from Canada and 18-year-old Emma Raducanu from the UK. Both were long shots going into the tournament. Fernandez was unseeded and had never beaten a top 10 player before. This week, she's beaten 3 of the top 5 ranked players in the world, including defending champ Naomi Osaka. Raducanu entered the Open as a qualifier. That means the 18-year-old had to make it through a field of 3 fellow unranked players just to get to the first round.
I thought it was a deer for about 3 seconds, and then I noticed it was actually a zebra.
And I said, zebras? I was like, are you sure you saw zebras?
But the video proved it. The family says there were actually 3 zebras. But where on earth did they come from?
Have you ever gotten a call for zebras on the loose before?
First time in 39 years.
This farm off nearby Dooley Station Road has a USDA permit for 39 zebras, but somehow 5 escaped. He says they are not dangerous as long as you don't approach them. Taylor says the Farm and Animal Services have a plan to catch the zebras, but it will take a number of days.
You can't hunt them down. They're just too fast. They run. They won't let you get near them. So if you spook them, you're just pushing them further out.
It took a miracle for this precious moment to happen.
Sarah Sharp holding her baby boy. And it wouldn't be possible if it weren't for her twin, Kathy Stoner, who took on the ultimate labor of love, carrying him for 9 months. 33-year-old Sarah from Tennessee was diagnosed with a rare form of cancer in 2018. After she went into remission, the cancer came back, and Sarah was faced with a tough decision to undergo a hysterectomy.
They were actually preparing her for a surgery. I said, "Don't worry, I'll have your babies." I said, "I know we joked about this, but this is something that has been on my heart." What an incredible gift.
The surrogacy made an already unbreakable twin bond even stronger. The family welcomed John Ryder into the world just 3 weeks ago.
Welcome back. As we all know, hundreds of first responders in this city gave their lives on 9/11, leaving their loved ones stunned and also humbled by their incredible sacrifice to the city and the people they served. We met 4 siblings who lost their father that day, and how they chose to honor him reflects the best of humanity.
He was a big kid, and he loved life. He loved working on cars, loved music. He was just a very fun and playful guy.
He would still have like a lot of energy, come home and like play with all of us, the neighborhood kids. He was big on like riding his bike, throwing the football around, and playing his guitar. If he wasn't with us, that's all he did. And he was a huge Grateful Dead fan. So he was either like humming songs or just playing to the guitar.
He was 39 years old, but those who knew Carl Lassaro describe him as a big kid. A man who loved music, his wife and 6 children, and his job as a firefighter. He worked at Engine 54, only 4 miles from the World Trade Center. On September 11th, 2001, he was one of the first responders who answered the call to help, putting his own life in danger to save others. Of the 15 who left from Engine 54 Ladder 4 that day, none returned home. Now, 20 years later, 65 children of New York firefighters who died that day have picked up their own helmets, inspired by their loved ones' ultimate sacrifice. For Carl, 4 of his 6 children have continued his legacy. Does it get any easier 20 years later?
I think during this time, it's kind of expected to feel those old feelings, and for them to resurge. But the days in between, when you don't expect it, when a song comes on the radio or you see something that reminds you of him, those are the days that kind of hit you a little bit harder.
The crisp blue skies in the early morning of September 11th belied the darkness of the day ahead.
People are jumping out the windows. Over there, they're jumping out the windows, I guess, because they're trying to save themselves. I don't know.
We came from the 82nd floor, and I don't know where my peers are. I don't know. I hope to God they're okay.
It's horrific. I can't believe this is happening.
We want to tell you what we know as we know it. We just got a report in that there's been some sort of explosion at the World Trade Center in New York City.
Among the 2,977 lives lost, Carl Lassaro left his 6 young children fatherless. Carl Jr., Matt, Rebecca, and Mark were 13, 12, 9, and 7 at the time.
I remember my mom, we used to go carpool, and it was her day to bring everyone and pick them up. And I saw my dad that morning. The night before, I asked him for Tic Tacs. So I remember I was begging him. So before he went to work, he dropped them off, and he kissed me goodbye. And then in school, they kept calling us one by one. And my mom, when she picked me up, she was just like so frantic. I remember my mom was back and forth on the phone, and I was 9, so I didn't really understand much and like what was going on until like a few days, weeks went by. Just my dad never came home. I thought my dad pulled up one day, and it was the chief to tell my mom that what was going on. My mom didn't understand. I finally hit her days later that there was a big thing. He wasn't coming home.
Matt, your recollections from that day?
I was like, oh, my dad's a fucking, he's down there. I was proud, but I didn't know what the hell had happened. I didn't know the severity of it. He had the beeper, so I remember just calling, just beeping him, and no answer. That's how life got to be, without him. Coming down here, just waiting. People were getting found every day. Live, dead. They didn't find nothing. Not a bone, not a hair, not a momentum. The memento. Yeah, it just kind of sucked, you know?
So knowing that ultimate sacrifice, how did you all then each individually decide, I'm going to do what Dad did, that ultimately caused him to lose his life?
I think it's the impact he left. It's like the department's small. My dad has such a big heart. And through the years after 9/11, we met so many people that just even having one conversation with him, he impacted so many.
The bond that just formed through the firehouse is just like no other.
Ever since we grew up here, I think for us to give back, like my sister said, and to live a life of service is one way to really feel connected with my dad, and for us to feel whole in a way.
And so in a way, the FDNY, would you say, has helped you cope?
Yeah.
I would say, yeah, they were part of our lives.
It has been and always will be.
What do you think Dad would think about the four of you guys becoming firefighters?
He'd be proud.
Yeah.
100%, yeah. He's probably looking down at all of us right now, you know, he's smiling. Brings us that much closer to him, you know. We get to honor him this way, and I think there's no better way to honor him.
Hey, guys, I wanted you to be a doctor.
When you have your own children, you think you would encourage them to be firefighters?
After I know what I know now? Probably, yeah.
Yeah, I would definitely. Yeah.
Carl Asaro's body was never found, so his family opted to bury a guitar instead, filled with notes from loved ones, a symbol of his love of music. For 5 years, his namesake, Carl Jr., didn't visit Ground Zero. At one time, he actively avoided it. But now he finds it peaceful, telling us, since it was the last place his father was, he considers it to be his final resting place. And now, on the eve of the anniversary of one of the darkest days in American history, this family is trying to turn so much pain into perspective and purpose.
Yeah, I was having a conversation with my sister the other day. She was writing a speech, that she was asked to give. And we were having a conversation about it. We were talking about, like, you're only truly dead when the name's mentioned for the last time. And I thought that was powerful, and if that's the case, then my father and these men that were killed that day and sacrificed their life, they're going to live forever, through their legacy and their actions. Their name will be in history forever. And I think that's a beautiful thing. Their actions will always be remembered. Their stories will always be recited, and their lives and their beautiful moments will always be relived, and the people that loved them and cared about them. And that's something that keeps me going and helps me to accept what happened, is that they'll never be forgotten.
A heartfelt thanks to the Asaro siblings for sharing their story with us. Before we go tonight, the image of the day. All day from where we stand, we've watched people streaming through Ground Zero, paying tribute to the lives lost and the heroism displayed on this sacred ground. We promised on that awful day nearly 20 years ago that we would never forget, and we have not and never will. That is our show for this hour. From here at Ground Zero, stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of today's top stories. Thanks so much for streaming with us. Coming up in the next hour, we're staying on top of several things. Prince Andrew is being sued by a woman who accuses him of sexual assault when she was just 17. But has he actually been served the papers? And the babies of 9/11. 20 years ago, our Diane Sawyer sat down with a group of young women who were pregnant when their husbands died in the terror attacks. 20 years later, she is bringing those families back together. It is a story you will want to see.
It's an extraordinary story.
A computer salesman was supposed to report to prison to begin a 17-year sentence.
They let him turn himself into jail with no escort.
No one thought he would run.
How do you evade capture for 25 years? How do you do that?
Now, join the search, following the U.S. Marshals as they uncover new leads in a global manhunt. Can you help catch this fugitive? Have you seen this man?
Have you seen this man?
Have you seen this man? Listen and join the all-new hunt wherever you get your podcast.
most powerful stories of our time, anytime. Nightline.
Now streaming on ABC News Live 2020. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues, The Hunt. True crime 2020. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
Admit it. These days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
Feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
It's all about you.
I know what happened, and I'm not guilty.
Why the fascination with criminal trials? Figure out what's really out there.
She revealed she had murdered his family.
I know in my heart they did this.
It's the time of suspicion.
The ending's really tough.
You don't know whether truth is going to be difficult to find unless you try to find it.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
All right, we're gonna move back. Let's move back.
We're surrounded by people
squeezing into this bomb shelter.
We're on an urgent delivery run.
Not afraid to go there.
So my question, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Breaking news, live events.
This is the moment.
Streaming straight to you, anytime, anywhere.
You just met one friend right here.
You're watching ABC News Live. Thanks for streaming with us. Hi there, I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. We're monitoring several developments here at ABC News at this hour. 2 police officers were ambushed in a shooting in Florida that left a deputy injured. Dash cam shows deputies conducting a traffic stop when a man near a 2-month-old opened fire on the officers with an assault rifle. He was killed at the scene. Prince Andrew and his lawyers have refused multiple attempts to be served of this sexual assault lawsuit filed against him, according to his accuser's lawyer and documents obtained by ABC News. A process server working on behalf of Virginia Giuffre's lawyer filed an affidavit saying he was turned away by guards and on another attempt told to leave the documents with Metropolitan Police at the gate, who would then hand the files over to the prince's legal team. The accuser's lawyer says he has taken other steps to serve the prince as well. Now the U.S. judge overseeing the lawsuit has to determine if the prince has officially been served notice. The first hearing in the case begins on Monday. The prince has previously denied Virginia Giuffre's allegations. A Wisconsin judge approved the conditions to release Anissa Weir from a mental health institution this upcoming Monday. Weir, who is now 19, known for stabbing 12-year-old Peyton Lutner to death along with a friend back in 2014 to please the fictional character Slender Man. She was initially sentenced to 25 years at a mental health facility after pleading guilty to second-degree homicide. The judge determined that Weir no longer poses a threat to herself or others. Back here tonight at Ground Zero on the eve of that solemn milestone, 20 years since September 11th. All day long here, we've been seeing people stopping by to pay their respects to the 2,977 lives lost on September 11th and the many more since then. So many still carrying deeply personal burdens 20 years later. Tonight, as the country prepares to commemorate the lives lost and affected, we take a look at how the world changed forever. ABC's Rena Roy reports.
It began like any other day, but in just minutes, America was forever changed.
This is at the World Trade Center, and there has been some sort of explosion.
Oh my God!
I realized if I had stayed up there, I would have been dead. People that I knew were 100 and plus stories up were hanging outside of the window, and I watched them. They were making a sign of the cross, holding hands, and jumping. To me, those people were heroes.
The names of the 2,977 people who were killed will be read out loud Saturday, exactly 20 years after their lives were cut short. One of them, Florence's friend, Jill Maurer Campbell.
I always remember Jill's smile. I try never to think about the way she died.
The The catastrophic attacks launching America's longest war.
Go, come on, come on, come on!
It would take 10 years before the U.S. killed the man responsible for the attacks, the head of al-Qaeda, Osama bin Laden. With the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan and the government now run by the Taliban, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin worries that al-Qaeda will regenerate, saying he has put the Taliban on notice that they should not allow that to happen.
The threat today is different than what we faced 20 years ago. It has evolved and morphed, and in some ways we are in a better place, but in other ways it's more complex.
Rena Roy joins us now also from Ground Zero tonight. Rena, it certainly has been a solemn day here. What has struck you the most about being down here at Ground Zero?
You know, Lindsay, as we all know, being in a busy, chaotic city like New York, it's really not easy to find peace and quiet. But I have to say I found that earlier.
All right,
I walked by the reflecting pools earlier tonight, and I think a lot of people felt the same way. Even with the cars honking and the people walking by, there were a lot of people who took the time to stop. They took the time to pause, and it was refreshing to see in these divided times, people standing together in silence to remember and to reflect. Lindsay.
And Rena, while there is no credible threat, as you mentioned, federal officials are also saying that domestic terrorism is now a big concern right now across the country.
Yeah, Homeland Security officials say with the spread of misinformation, that has created a lot of homegrown hate, and they're worried that extremists will promote violence, and they say that is the biggest threat to Americans right now. Lindsay.
Rena Roy, our thanks to you. And a short time ago, we heard from President Biden in a 6-minute message reflecting on the 20th anniversary of 9/11, the president paying his respects to the victims of the attack while calling on Americans to come together as the nation did after September 11th. And you can see President Biden there boarding Air Force One. This is live footage just coming in.
Unity is what makes us who we are. America at its best. To me, that's the central lesson of September 11th. It's that at our most vulnerable, in the push and pull of all that makes us human, in the battle for the soul of America, unity is our greatest strength. Unity doesn't mean we have to believe the same thing. We must have a fundamental respect and faith in each other and in this nation.
That unity not on display in reaction to President Biden's new pandemic battle plan, calling for large businesses to mandate vaccines for their employees. The CDC today supporting him with new studies showing that vaccines dramatically reduce the risk of hospitalization and death, even from the Delta variant. ABC's chief national correspondent Matt Guttmann has the latest.
Tonight, as the country staggers past that grim milestone of 1 in 500 Americans killed by COVID, millions of American workers face a new reality, the president's sweeping move to mandate vaccinations.
The right thing to do is to mandate it, unfortunately, because a lot of people are passing away.
I understand the intention, but at the end of the day, I still feel like people should have the right to choose.
And already, Republican governors in at least 19 states blasting the new rule for businesses.
You should not lose your job just because Joe Biden is having this hissy fit.
The governor of South Carolina saying he will fight them to the gates of hell. And those 19 states with some of the lowest vaccination rates have seen COVID cases surge this summer. Our Rachel Scott today pressing the president on Republicans' vow to fight those mandates.
Mr. President, what is your message to Republicans who are calling your vaccine requirements an overreach, who are threatening to challenge it in court?
Have at it. Look, I am so disappointed that particularly some Republican governors have been so cavalier with the health of these kids.
The president bracing for the political battle ahead. With 75% of Americans already partially vaccinated, the White House aiming to reach the last quarter of American adults who remain unvaccinated. And tonight there is fresh evidence the vaccines remain highly effective in preventing severe symptoms, even against the Delta variant. The CDC reporting today that more than 90% of patients in hospitals are unvaccinated.
Those who were unvaccinated were about 4.5 times more likely to get COVID-19, over 10 times more likely to be hospitalized, and 11 times more likely to die.
But data is showing the vaccine is slightly less effective for older people, about 80% effective at keeping them out of the hospital versus about 90% for younger people. Just this week, President Biden saying that the decision over the booster shot, that third shot, is in the hands of the FDA and the CDC, and the administration will distribute them as soon as they're authorized. This map showing the relentless spread of the virus just over the past 6 weeks. Kentucky today calling in more than 300 National Guard to its hospitals.
We're already at max capacity. We're already stretched so thin. What do we do when we have our winter surge that we can count on every year?
Our thanks to Matt. Next to an ABC News exclusive, the latest on the investigation into that Colorado amusement park tragedy. A 6-year-old plunging to her death on a popular amusement park ride. And now a friend of the family is speaking exclusively to ABC, saying that they want to make sure this nightmare doesn't happen to anywhere else. Trevor Ault has more.
As authorities investigate the tragic amusement park death of a Colorado 6-year-old, a friend of her family tells us they're devastated beyond words.
This is a parent's worst nightmare and something you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy.
Bemney McConan speaking on behalf of the Estefanos family, who lost their daughter, one Gail, in a fatal accident Sunday at Glenwood Caverns Adventure Park. One Gail was with her family on the haunted mine drop, which puts the riders in near free fall for 110 feet.
I believe the ride was in operation when the child fell from it. The patient will be a 6-year-old female, and she fell approximately 110 feet.
We're told park employees began administering first aid until paramedics arrived, but she did not survive. Investigators are still working to determine what led to Estefanos' death. The park telling us in a statement, "We are deeply saddened and ask that you please keep the family of the deceased in your thoughts and prayers."
Their world shattered. One moment they are in denial. The next minute they are trying to plead with God to bring her back. They are bargaining with him. They are angry.
While it's not been determined if the park was negligent in one Gail's death, Colorado's laws can limit the right to sue a ride operator even if they were at fault, especially if the family signed a waiver beforehand. And the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment says the ride was inspected in June and has passed inspections since opening in 2017. But McConan says the family is determined to enact change in one Gail's name.
They wouldn't want anyone to go through what they are going through right now. So they're going to do everything they can to make sure this never happens again. Even through her death, she's going to make a difference.
Our thanks to Trevor for that. Still to come, more American citizens heading out of Afghanistan. And how do you grapple with faith after such unimaginable loss? We speak to the NYPD chaplain at the time of 9/11 coming up.
It's an extraordinary story.
A computer salesman was supposed to report to prison to begin a 17-year sentence.
They let him turn himself into jail with no escort.
No one thought he would run.
How do you evade capture for 25 years? How do you do that?
Now, join the search, following the U.S. Marshals as they uncover new leads in a global manhunt. Can you help catch this fugitive?
Have you seen this man?
Have you seen this man?
Have you seen this man? Listen and join the all-new hunt wherever you get your podcast.
The most powerful stories of our time, anytime. Nightline.
Now streaming on ABC News Live 2020. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues. The Hunt. True crime 2020. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
Admit it. These days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
Feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
It's all about you.
All right, here we go. You ready? Let's do it.
Yes, it's the show America wants and America needs right now.
This is What Would You Do? Let's go. How are you?
How cute. Yeah. So what will you be watching Saturdays on ABC News Live?
What would you do?
Hey, I guess I just found out.
The What Would You Do Marathon, 12 to 6 Eastern, every Saturday on ABC News Live.
My favorite show.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
All right, we're gonna move back. Let's move back.
We're surrounded by people
squeezing into this bomb shelter.
We're on an urgent delivery run.
Not afraid to go there.
So my question, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Breaking news, live events.
This is the moment.
Streaming straight to you, anytime, anywhere.
You just met one friend right here.
You're watching ABC News Live. Thanks for streaming with us. Welcome back. We're tracking several international headlines at this hour. A second Qatar Airways flight took off from Kabul airport this morning, carrying 19 U.S. citizens and 11 permanent residents. The U.S. is also halting U.S.-bound flights for Afghan evacuees from two main bases overseas, citing unspecified health concerns. Israeli police said that they caught 2 of the 6 Palestinians who broke out of a maximum security prison this week. The prisoners had elaborately planned their escape, lowering themselves into an underground cavity from their cells. The escapees included 4 members of the militant group Islamic Jihad who were serving life sentences. A major wildfire tearing through southeast Spain Friday. More than 38 water-dropping aircraft did little to quell the fire that has forced the evacuation of 1,000 people and killed a firefighter. More than 9,000 acres have burned. One fire official calling the fire a hungry monster. Arson is suspected as the cause. And on the eve of this somber anniversary, how do you reconcile faith with the horror of that day? Earlier, we spoke with a clergy member who had a front row seat to history. We're joined now by the Honorable Susan Johnson Cook. She's held a lot of impressive titles. Among them, she was chaplain of the NYPD on September 11, 2001. So good to be with you. I thank you for coming on the show tonight.
Thank you for having me.
So give us a sense that day. You're faced right on the front lines with people who are so desperate for a message, right?
Yes.
Trying to make sense of something that seemed to be senseless. What did you say?
You know, you don't know what to say until the moment happens. So the first contact were with family members of the police department who were missing in action. And you listen and you allow them to emote, and then you just give them hope that we will find your loved ones. Then we came down to what's now called Ground Zero, and actually there were firefighters and others who were trying to rescue, and there were people who had made a makeshift hospital right behind where we're standing, and they were depressed because no one had been brought in. This is at 10 o'clock at night, and nobody had been brought in, and so they said, will you pray with me? And for that moment, it didn't matter whether you were black or white, what your religion was, we formed a circle with firefighters, medical personnel, ministers, and we began to pray that there would be some rescue efforts and not recovery at that point, and that everyone would come out safely. The fire department had just lost one of their chaplains that same day, Father Judge, and so they were mourning, but they were also trying to find their brethren and sisters who were perishing.
So on that first day, I imagine it's somewhat easier because you can provide hope,
yes,
right? But when that dwindles and when that hope is gone, what do you say to people who are then questioning God, questioning their faith, questioning their belief system?
You begin to say that God is present in every situation, and that God was with your loved ones, and God is with you now, even through all of this. One of the special groups that called us in the subsequent days were the 911 operators, who had been on the phone with people on their last moments, at their last breaths. And they had asked the people who were perishing, asked the 911 operators to please notify my family. And they became prayer warriors. They became people of hope, even in the midst of what was a perishing situation. And so I say for those subsequent days, you say that God is everywhere, and you say that God is with you even in this situation, and we find hope even in the smallest places.
In the midst of the despair.
Mm-hmm.
Any particular memories that you have that maybe even were hard to shake over time of people who were just brought to their knees with devastation?
Well, you know, today we honored some 911 operators, and at the moment they began to speak and they teared up, all of the memories flushed in our minds again. And so every moment was hard, particularly the funerals, because we began to go to firefighters and police officers. The city became one. And so every funeral, every day was harder to watch the families, but to watch your cohort, your colleagues who would just be in tears. Every moment was very hard. And for the chaplains, you know, we were called, because it used to be separation of church and state, but we were called in places that we had not been before, and to try to speak faith to people who did not have it, to say, hold on, have some holding on power. So all those moments were hard. And I remember the 60th day pulling over to the side of the Bronx River Parkway, and I just cried, because it was like I had had all the tears of everyone else who couldn't cry. And so I cried, and from that moment, I remember how painful that was and how important post-traumatic stress training is, because none of us were prepared for that moment.
You also worked as a bridge, basically, between a number of different diverse communities, the NYPD and those of the Muslim community, Arab community. How did you do that? How did you try to unite and bring people together? And what larger message might you have for all of us?
So we became a partnership of faith. A lot of us from different traditions, faith traditions, said we need to come together. We formed what was called a partnership of faith for the city of New York. And we began not to just respond to traumatic situations, but we said we need to get to know each other. So we had Seders in Baptist churches, and we had Muslims preaching in Jewish temples. And what began to happen is we had relationships form, and we understand that bridges are only formed when you have somebody to touch someone on the other side of that bridge. And so we said from this day forward, no matter what happens, we walk together, because when we walk together, we work together and we win together. And as a people, it's no black, white, it's no ethnicity, it's not who voted for whom or who did not vote for whom. It's about, can we be hope for people in the midst of hopelessness? And I think that is the message. We can be hope in the midst of hopelessness.
We all need that hope, especially going through this time and reliving, hashing up all these memories. Yes. Susan Johnson Cook, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now to the babies of 9/11. Back in 2001, many may recall that ABC's Diane Sawyer spent time with the little ones whose fathers died in the attacks while their mothers were still pregnant with them. Well, 2 decades later, Diane brings these families back together to see how their lives were shaped by this national tragedy.
20 years ago, we set out on Mission Impossible. 63 tiny forces of nature unleashed in one room. For a nation reeling after the towers fell, they were 63 reasons to believe in the future. But could we possibly corral them into a photograph?
Let's move them in fast.
They squirm.
All right, do you think we have a shot in the world? I don't think so.
They howl as their little friends look on baffled.
We need one more car seat.
They tumble. Fall in love.
Oh my goodness.
And they go rogue.
Hello.
Finally, we get it. I'm holding a twin in each arm. And those twins, 20 years later?
Got it. They were suggesting that they pick you up. That's it.
And here they all are now. The crawlers, the howlers, Tumbler 1, Tumbler 2, all grown up today.
Nobody's falling out of their chair. That was so hilarious. Not for you, perhaps, but for us.
And I began to get an immediate answer to one of my questions from long ago. Would these babies who never met their fathers end up looking out through his eyes smiling his smile. It's Jenna and her son Gabriel. That laughing little boy now towering over me.
I'm sorry, I have to just gawk. It's really too amazing, isn't it? It is. It's all these years.
So many mothers teaching us about the gift they gave their children, knowing that Dad was never far away.
I came up with a little kind of thing that we did together. You know, where does Daddy Jim live? And he would say, in heaven. And who does he live with? The angels. And when you want to talk to Daddy Jim, you close your eyes and look inside, and he would say, my heart. Mama. Where does your dada live? Heaven. Heaven. And who does he live with? God. And who else? Angels. And when you want to talk to Daddy, you close your eyes and look inside the where? And where's your heart? Oh, yes, that's nice, love. Daddy loves you.
Baby Jack is now 19 years old and grateful for the mother who tried so hard to help him keep his dad close.
I just appreciate everything she's done because she's like the strongest person I've ever met. Yeah, really appreciate her.
Thanks, buddy. I love you, buddy. I love you.
Our thanks to Diane Sawyer for that. And that is our show for tonight. But our coverage of the somber 20th anniversary of 9/11 continues here on ABC News Live and ABC This Evening. We leave you now with a look at the tribute of light in honor of those fallen towers here in Lower Manhattan. I'll be back here tomorrow morning with Diane, Robin, David, and the entire team for live coverage of the 20th anniversary. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. Good night.
It's an extraordinary story.
A computer salesman was